good family man, hard
Mhm.
worker, worked for the union, all the things that line up to this not happening. And then he did it, and he did it in front of his wife.
Oh my
And so
goodness.
for me, there's so many things to unpack there, Mark, right? It's
Yeah.
like, okay, time out. He had all these things going well. They were planning a vacation. Their kids are doing well in school. Their daughter actually goes to school. My daughter, that's how we found out about it. My daughter found out first, which was horrible. But there's so many things to unpack there, because for me, I always think, first of all, how bad does it get for you to have to do that? Just do it, the act alone, and then to do it in front of your wife, and then have you think about, like, I think about everything. I think about my kids. I think about the people around me. Who would it affect? I'm just that guy. I always feel like any move that I make, what would it do to the people around me?
I appreciate you bringing up the health, the mental and physical aspect. We all know it's interconnected, and then we tie in spiritual and that. And so there's a lot, and as a leader of a company, in this case, we talked about entrepreneurs and running MSPs and the demands of that. You're right. It's not just about feeding our own mouth, but those around us, right? And make sure it just spreads out from there. So
right.
We need to be healthy and strong and mentally and physically. And I've, maybe you saw on social media recently, hit that half a century mark and celebrated that out in Vegas here, was a week ago or so. Prior to that, I just started doing a lot of reflecting, right? Going, oh my gosh, I can't believe I'm going to be officially old or whatever we thought.
Hey, easy.
Right?
I passed that mark a couple years ago.
Well, it's another decade, right? It's a big number if you think about it. And where are you at in life, and where's that going to look at? What's the next half going to look like? But I had an incident where I went to the doctor and they're like, hey, like, we need to be, you're hypertensive. Like, no shit. Like, do you know what I deal with? Right. Like, like, well, let's put you, I'm like, no, we're not putting on me anything. We're not doing that. Let me see if I can fix it. Right. Like, I know I've been slacking. So let me, focus on me, get that exercise in. I've since, that was January 16th. I've since dropped 35 pounds.
I see the difference, my friend. I do.
Thanks. I said, I'm making the effort. And, trying to, and hey, even at that 30-minute session on the treadmill in the morning, getting that walk in, and get the incline walk in, trying to make that a priority. Even though, sleep needs to be a priority too. And I think we don't give ourselves enough of that. And I don't average enough nearly. But even this morning, it was like going, no, you've got it. Regardless, maybe I didn't get my full 30 in, but I got my 23, and I was like, hey, I got to get moving. But making that a priority, or even going on vacation or traveling, I still try to make sure I'm getting something in. Because that's the only way I'm going to combat a lot of these other things we're faced with.
Well, that's the other side of it, right? You're going to make yourself better prepared to handle all the crap that we're talking about, right? Instead of just being engulfed in it and getting stuck in the weeds and not having any moments, you're worse apt to handle everything. If you don't have the rests, if you don't get the mental breaks, if you don't get the physical breaks, if you don't do the things that you need to do, it's so much harder to dig out of that. And you feel like, there's so much pressure. I mean, in the case of, the thing that spun me around, Mark, the friend that, I won't go too deep into it, but the one friend that got so mentally unstable, he killed himself. And this person on the outside, like, sound old school Irishman, like, good family man, hard worker, worked for the union, all the things that line up to this not happening. And then he did it, and he did it in front of his wife.
Oh my goodness.
So for me, there's so many things to unpack there, Mark, right? It's like, okay, time out. He had all these things going well. They were planning a vacation. Their kids are doing well in school. Their daughter actually goes to school. My daughter, that's how we found out about it. My daughter found out first, which was horrible. But there's so many things to unpack there, because for me, I always think, first of all, how bad does it get for you to have to do that? Just do it, the act alone, and then to do it in front of your wife, And then, and then have you think about, like, I think about everything. I think about my kids. I think about the people around me. Who would it affect? I'm just that guy. I always feel like any move that I make, what would it do to the people around me? Right. And sometimes I overthink that with, with things that I'm doing, but I couldn't unpack it, Mark. I couldn't figure out how bad what state your brain had to be in to get to that point and do that, knowing that that's it. That's the end. Yeah. That's it. And everybody around, and by the way, I sometimes say to myself, what a coward's way out, right? Because, you got to get out, but everybody around you is going to be affected for a very long time after that. But then, that's another thing that's going to be going through their brain. Like what does the human mind have to be going through for that to happen, right? And guess what? At the end of the day, what everybody said it was his job.
Oh my God. Wow.
Imagine that. It was his work that drove him to this, and his job in the union. And it's like, oh my God, that clicked for me. Like, then I was like, oh my God, I have so many friends I need to call right now. Like, you know what I mean? It's like, because in our industry, we see it. We have so much shit happen to us, whether there's a security incident, or employees leave, or employees do really bad stuff, or family problems, right? There's all these things that happen. And so what do we do as a community to at least, listen, we're not going to stop it, but maybe we can help it. And maybe we can have it happen less if we're aware and we start to talk to owners and everybody in the business, not just owners, because service managers, techs, everybody has stuff that they have to deal with. How do we do it without saying it? Because as well as I do, like, we eased into this conversation, then all of a sudden here we are, we're talking about it.
Right.
If you were at an event and there was a room where they were talking about mental health, how likely are you to go in there, right? And that's the thing. Most owners would be like, oh, I don't need that, and go to the next session. But if they happened in there and we were talking like this, I think that changes that narrative, because it's like, yeah, shit, I do have a lot of stuff on my plate, and my brain's all over the place. So changing that and making it happen. Because, by the way, this happened, Mark. CompTIA had a conversation around mental health. I think Desiree was on that panel.
Okay.
And they did a really great job, but I think it was like 90% of the people in the room were women. The men didn't go in, right? And I got to be honest, it's the men who need it most, from a standpoint of the women are more in touch with, hey, I'm going to check this out, and I'm going to find ways to.
Well, but I'm assuming as a man, it's a sign of weakness if I'm in there, or I'm stronger than that. I'm stronger than that.
Yeah, that's what I mean when I say that. It doesn't mean that women don't work as hard, because I think they work harder. What I mean is men are so stubborn, and they think, well, I'm weak if I go do that. And to me, now more than ever, we have to start being more vulnerable, and we have to have these conversations, and we have to understand this. And, obviously the pressures are for all business owners and for all people, humans. So, my point about the men and women is that I feel like, to me, women seem to be more in touch. They understand it. And I say it all the time. The reason why we need more women in the industry is because, quite frankly, they're just better than us, Mark. They are. I mean, every female tech that I've ever had has blown the men away. They get it. They move. They do their thing. Sure, they have different issues. Like men have different issues. We all have issues.
Yes, we do.
But I still feel like they're better. They're more in tune, and they click, and they work, and they go. But of course, like all of us, we have things we have to deal with in the mental side of our brain. So this helps all of us. But yeah, I sometimes have to be careful, Mark, because I have my female friends who are like, hey, be careful there. That's not true. We need it too. I'm like, no, you're not getting what I'm saying. I don't mean it that way. What I mean is we're just dumber about this stuff. We just don't get it. We think it's not a big deal. And like you said, it makes us weak, so I'm not going to have that conversation. I don't need that. I don't need to be in that room. And honestly, this whole entire community needs to be in that room. We all need to hear it. We all need to discuss it. We need to be open about it. And we don't need to be made fun of for being vulnerable on crap that's affecting us. Because, I'll tell you right now, I may be one of the biggest bears in the room as far as hey, I can be the tough guy, but I have problems and issues, and I need this stuff as much as the next person. I'm willing to admit that. And, I got to walk into more rooms where people are talking about this stuff and ways to handle the stress that hits you. And when you hit a wall, what are your next steps? Because I've been in situations where I felt like, holy crap, I have nowhere to turn. I have nowhere to go. What's my next step? And, luckily I had good support system around me and I clawed my way out. But I think if I was better prepared for those moments and I had better ideas of how to fix that and get my mental state right, I probably would have dealt with them even better.
I could imagine that. And being obviously educated in that, right? Like, so we talk about, we're all people and people have problems, right? We're all facing problems. So as part of that reflection I mentioned earlier, 2 years ago, I lost one of my best friends, and, that is just one individual. They stood at his bedside with my hand on his shoulder, as he passed over, right? Knowing that his lifestyle put him there.
Yep.
Right. If I look back further, when you start losing family members as we age, you start losing family members, start hitting a little bit closer to you, or a little bit harder. You're losing classmates. Right. Some of my best friends that I had in high school have committed suicide over the past 5 years. You start realizing you got to start thinking about some of this and how it's impacting. And we talk about understanding, and even if it's, like I said, we're all going through stuff. We all have problems, and even reaching out to those people, right? Just checking in, especially, obviously, I'm part of a peer group. We have peers, we have people friends with, we know they're going through something. Sometimes it's hard from a timing aspect because we're being pulled in so many different directions, but stop yourself and just reach out, check in on them.
Yep.
Because that could be all the difference that they need in their world. It's just knowing that, hey, you're there. I've used this example before. We've had instances, as you talk about community and coming together as peers to helping one another out, right? Showing up on the doorstep and lending a hand. Or I remember being coaxed to say, hey, come to Arizona. If anything, you need to come and need to let us surround you so we can work this out, these problems you're having, right? Because I was going through a huge thing at the time.
Yeah, I had, you're right. And as we get older, we have more and more of that, right? The classmates, the friends, the people who are, I had that going along was a crazy thing, right? Lifestyle. You said that, I had a friend who rode motorcycles like a complete lunatic, and that caught up with him. It wasn't his fault, but it doesn't matter because he was always speeding and running around, and a truck pulled out in front of him and boom. So, it's like, what do we do when that happens, and how do we, deal with our own emotions about it? Right. My wife knew him very well too. And my wife would just keep saying, you're so stupid. He's stupid. She's mad at him because, it's like, look what you did. You left us in this state. And, how did you do that? And then there's the other side where I had a friend who basically, now this probably was mental that led to physical. He basically drank himself to death. And we didn't realize the kid was leaving work, going to the liquor store, buying a bottle and drinking the whole thing every night. And that was his routine. Yeah. He would go home from work, buy a bottle, come home, blah, blah, blah. And nobody really caught it. You know what I mean? No one caught this happening. So you just don't know what was going through his mind, what was happening. He went through a divorce, but didn't, maybe if you had the conversation when we could have said, hey, but you got your kids, you don't want to leave them, and you still want to love them. Right. But maybe that conversation just never got had because no one knew that he was completely miserable.
Hi, I'm Mark Thomas, founder and CEO of Current Tech Solutions and Cyber Guardians. We know business owners like you want to focus on growing your company, not worrying about IT problems or security threats. That's where we come in. Our team uses AI to protect your business from cyber risks and keep everything running smoothly. If you're ready for peace of mind and a stronger future, reach out to us today. Let's secure and elevate your business together.